Hello there, and welcome to the Counselor's Kitchen, where the food is therapy and the kitchen table is safety. We want to have a conversation today, so we've got just the spot for you right here at the kitchen table, where we talk about life and everything it has to offer. So pull up a seat and join the conversation right here at the Counselor's Kitchen table. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, whatever time you're listening. It's Davion here again with another episode of the Counselor's Kitchen Table podcast, and I am elated with this special guest, my surrogate spiritual mom, Pastor C.J. Henry. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell them a little bit about yourself, Pastor Henry.
Yes. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're listening. I am as well elated to be here with Minister Davion. I am Pastor C.J. Henry, and I am a spiritual counselor,
Yeah.
teacher, motivator, encourager, and all of that. But beyond all that, I am an individual that allows God to use me to help others to become the best version of themselves and to overcome things that I have gone through and some I may not have.
Yes, beautiful, beautifully put. Like I say, y'all, she is, when I say a spiritual mom, I mean a spiritual mom. Excuse me, many of you know that I was a motherless child, right? I lost my mom a few years ago, and thank God, she's just stayed in with me, and it's so good, and very fitting for today's episode and your story, how God really has just restored you tremendously, and we're going to get into that because that is the word of the day. The word of the day is restoration, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys that definition. It says the act of restoring, renewal, revival, or reestablishment, the state or fact of being restored. The second definition says a return of something to its former, original, normal, or unimpaired condition. The third definition says restitution of something that was taken away or lost. So, any of those definitions stick out to you, or what does that word restoration mean to you, speak to you, and anything in any way that you kind of see fit? How does that word speak to you, Pastor Henry?
Well, actually, it speaks to me in all of the ways
Yeah,
because the first definition that you gave, the act of restoring and renewal and revival, when you have gone through traumatic experiences,
yeah,
just experiences of life that seems to knock you off your feet,
mm,
cause you to become disillusioned, disconnected, and you've lost things, you've lost people, or whatever the case may be, and you're not sure how to do that. But
yeah,
restoration, when it happens,
mm-hmm,
you don't realize that what you get back, it seems so much better
yes,
than what it was before it was gone,
mm,
right? And it happens through a process, though, right?
yeah,
And then the second definition, a return of something to its former original. Now, I'm here to say with that, that usually when you are restored,
mm-hmm,
you have been restored greater
yes,
than what it was before the incident or the experience happened. And
yeah,
then that last definition, restitution of something taken away, when on based on our topic for tonight, a
mm,
lot of things are taken away in a situation as we're going to talk about in a minute. But one
mm-hmm,
of the main things that was taken away was my peace.
yeah,
Okay. And so when you have been restored, as I was restored, I
mm-hmm,
received a greater peace, a different level of peace, a deeper level of peace than
mm-hmm.
only God could have done.
Yes, beautiful. That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. And one of the things that I like in that second definition, return of something to its former original normal unimpaired condition. We are spiritual beings, and so in this world we were created spiritually before even the foundations of the earth was laid, and the Bible makes that very clear that he had a plan, He had our names. He had our everything, the number of hairs on our head before the foundations of the earth were ever even laid. And so that's scripture, right? And so oftentimes we don't think about it, but sometimes when we lose people, that in and of itself is a restoration process,
Yes.
because that person or that spirit or that being, that soul, is literally returning back unto God in its original state.
Yes.
And here's the good:
Yes.
unimpaired.
Yes.
Unimpaired condition, meaning there's purity, there's no blemish, there's no spots, there's no imperfections, there's no suffering, there's no violence, there's no just all the things, because an impairment is an impairment, and believe me, from the moment we enter this world until the moment we exit this world, we are going to go through impairments. And so that's the beauty of sometimes understanding that restoration takes place even in our departure from the world, because we're restored. We're being brought back to God, our most original, most pure, most spiritual, most intuitive place in the universe, and that's right with Him. So that does well for me. Um,
Yes.
any commentary on that? And
Yes, I think about, I have restored many things. I've restored furniture, old, vintage furniture. I used to collect antiques and restore them, go and pick them up and make them look brand new. The home that I live in is a home that was originally built in 1960, and it looked like it needed to be torn down when we purchased it. But
Mhm.
God gave me a vision for it, and we restored it, a complete restoration. And
Mhm.
it was a process, and it required patience. But at the end of it all, I didn't know what it originally looked like because it was in such bad condition. Just as when we collect antiques, sometimes we don't always know the original uh, physical appearance of it because it's been so damaged. However, when we see and we have faith to know that we can do a thing or a thing can be restored, and
Mhm.
we put our actions with our faith and our works with our faith, and
Yeah.
allow the creativity which comes from the most high God to come in,
Yeah.
then that thing can be restored. And so it's in the same manner, we on this spiritual journey are
Mhm.
here to go through experiences and learn lessons, and to have these things happen to us for a reason, not because of anything we've done or not because of a curse or anything like
Yeah.
that, but just because there is a purpose in it, not just for us, but
Mhm.
for someone else. And so, in our situation, when we allow ourselves to be restored, that's another thing, too, Minister. You have to get to a point where you allow yourself and allow God to restore you. You have to want to be restored.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna leave that at that. I'm not gonna get jump ahead too far, but yes, that's my commentary on that.
That's all right, and we're gonna transition on. But I love what you said, that you have to allow yourself to be restored. That's one thing that I currently have kind of journeyed into after having tremendous loss myself. Again, I'm going through another season of loss of loved ones, loss of people that I bonded with, and people, friends that I thought I would see forever, or people I thought I would be with forever. Those things, that they're designed on one hand to impair you, right? They're
Yeah.
designed to impair you on one hand, but they're also designed to help you get on a process of restoration, and that decision is up to you. So I love that you said that. We have a beeline word. This is the first time we've ever done a beeline word. Had two words of the day, but this word is actually just to kind of highlight something that we're going to be talking about, which is a sensitive subject, and we want to give respect to it. So the second word is Vilomah, which means against natural order. Now, this word is actually dedicated to specifically those who have lost children. So, for parents who have buried children, this is kind of a word. So you have widower, which is, or widow, somebody who's buried their spouse, right? This one is actually specifically spoken for parents who have buried their children. It's very befitting. and it deserves to be understood as well as treated with the utmost sensitivity. So we're highlighting that word to let people know that there is a specific term, there is a respectable term, and we want to be sensitive to those who have endured that kind of traumatic or grievance experience. So, how does the word or words of the day relate to you and your story, Pastor?
Well, the I've already talked about the word restoration, but the Vilomah word definitely, because in the losing or having a child transition
Mm,
as a parent in our natural world as we live, it is not the natural order.
yes.
All losses hurt. When we lose loved ones, it doesn't matter who, what connection the loved one may be.
Mm,
They're all hurtful. There
yeah.
is a process of grief and healing and mourning for all of them.
Yeah.
However, there are some that there's a natural order for it. We automatically think in the world that we live that as children, because our parents, grandparents, older uncles and aunts and older cousins, because
Mm,
they are older than we are, that the natural order is for them to grow old, for us to grow old, and then we transition and go on.
mhm,
However, it is a completely different order when your child is a child.
mhm,
You, as a parent, are expected to go before that child, and then you end up burying your child. So that is completely out of order as we know it in a natural sense, in our humanness, and in this world in which we live. But that word is very fitting. But as going through the process and healing, I've learned that that word is based on our thoughts,
yes.
our ideas.
Mhm,
But the word of God says his thoughts and his ways are not like our thoughts and our ways.
right.
And so, with that understanding, it goes to a spiritual level
Mhm,
versus our natural human level. But that word is very fitting for this session and for what happens in our mindset, our thoughts.
mhm,
And as a child is born into a mother or father, the parents there expected to
yes.
just rear that child up, train that child up in the way that they should go, and that we will leave that child here with the seeds that we planted, and it's going to be all peaches and cream. But when it doesn't happen that way,
Yes.
when it's the reverse order,
Mhm,
it's a completely different story.
yes. Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's definitely um, it's definitely something that we can never ever truly understand until it happens or if it happens to us. And it's unfortunate to say it that way, but it is very true. And I believe that in a number of different types of losses. For those of you who know, I've lost my mother, but it was, and according to our natural ways, the natural order. I was supposed to bury her. And so I say that those two dynamics, losing a parent and losing a child, as well as losing a spouse. Those three different dynamics are something you never, I mean, everybody loses people, right? You can, it's not like losing an uncle. It's not like losing a cousin. It's not like losing a best friend, even. It literally, those three dynamics of death are just things that, no one ever can really understand until it happens to them. And so, with that being said, Pastor, can you talk more about what that looks like, what that moment of look like? And you can talk about the specifics of whatever you want to talk about in that regard. But with that perspective in mind, what is that form of grief like for you? Or what was that form of grief like for you? And how did it affect your life?
Yes, definitely. Well, my son transitioned, believe it or not, it will be 20 years in January.
Wow.
It doesn't feel like that long because there are times that the hurt comes up again.
Yes.
Um, However, I can say that that form of grief that form of mourning, of grief and healing was a journey like never before.
Mm.
And I want to switch and just ad lib and give another word. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to, get too detailed about it, but
That's
there's a term called the dark night of the soul.
mm-hmm.
Okay. And the dark night of the soul is a spiritual um, journey. And usually the Catholic, it's normally a Catholic type of thing or term that the Catholics use, but it's a period of spiritual isolation and desolation and disconnection and emptiness where
Yeah.
you feel totally separated from our divine God, from the most high God.
Mm-hmm.
And you are, I felt consumed with sadness and sorrow and hopelessness and any other word that you can think of that's dark, gloomy, and doesn't feel good, right? And having that disconnect, feeling disconnected, isolated from God is a place all by itself. That's why it's called the dark night of the soul,
Mm-hmm.
because the pain, it's a soul, it goes to the soul. It's not just something that you just get over in a minute
Mm-hmm.
or even a month or even, I mean, it's a dark place. And it relates to when David was saying, even though I may walk in the valley,
Yes.
the shadow of death, that darkest place. Yes. And David in Psalms 23, when he talked about that shadow,
Mm-hmm.
the darkest, one of the darkest places, the shadow of death, the
Yeah.
valley, the darkest place. It is true. A shadow, as we know, is something that's cast behind you or beside you,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really connected to you, but it's a part of you, right? A shadow is something that's connected to you in some way, but it's a dark casting, something that's there, and you can't run from a shadow.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Same way that that shadow of death, meaning that you've had in my situation a son who was the age of 15,
Mm.
who was in a tragic car accident, and he left a shadow, right? And
Mm.
I, along with his siblings and other family members, I as a mother was in that shadow of death. So with that shadow of death comes some of those dark places, as I was saying, the dark night of the soul that
Mm.
you carry with you in that shadow. It's a very dark place. And my son was 15 and he was a youth missionary. He was preparing for Junior Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
very athletic. He ran track, played football on the swim team, basketball team, baseball team. I mean, just an all around American,
Yeah.
American boy. Never gave me any trouble. He just visited many churches and helped and assisted many pastors and did much missionary work, not just in the community in which we lived, but he traveled with other churches.
Mm-hmm.
And he accepted Jesus Christ at a very young age.
Beautiful.
Very special child.
Yeah.
Had gone through some things earlier in life, and they thought he was a special kid. And as his mom, I knew that he was a gifted child and had him tested. He was a gifted child
Mm-hmm.
and he just flourished. And so at the night of the accident, he had gone on 2 mission trips 2 weekends before.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular night was a Friday night. And he called to get permission. He was with his godparents,
Mm-hmm.
get permission to go on another mission trip. And I remember saying to him, you've been gone 2 weekends in a row. This is weekend number 3. I thought you were coming home. And then I teased him because he never had a girlfriend. And he said, Mom, you always said that the Lord's work come first. And I said, boy, don't argue with me, but you're right. So if
Mm-hmm.
that's what God is calling you to do, I have to let you do it. And because I knew he was in good hands, he was with his godparents were with him,
Yeah.
and that's what he enjoyed doing. And I remember teasing him, saying, I wonder if it's a little girl that's going on this mission trip. And he was like, no. And he had already told me a couple of times in a very serious way that he would never get married. He would never have children. But when I get really old, I would come and live with him, and he was going to be so wealthy, so wealthy.
Mhm.
Well, I took that in a literal sense as a mom, again, not thinking in any way that he would go before I would.
Yeah.
And he said it one time and I laughed it off.
Mm.
Well, the second time he told me, and he grabbed my arm, my wrist, and he said, "No, mom, listen to me. I'm never getting married. I'm never having children. I'm going to be very, very, very rich. And when you get really old, you're going to come and live with me." And I saw he was so serious, and it spooked me.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. It's like his soul just knew, he was in
Mm.
preparation,
Mm.
even if he didn't understand it totally, but he knew something.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, God gave me a dream and prepared me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the dream, me and the other two kids, his siblings, were in the kitchen, and there were drips of water coming from the ceiling, just like leaks, but just drip, drip, very. And we were all like in slow motion, very quiet. Nobody said a thing. And I knew immediately because he was the missing part of the family in that dream. The
Mm.
ceiling dripping as if the house was crying. And I tried to dismiss it. I was like, no, no, I'm tripping. I thought that I'm just having this dream because of what this boy told me. But
Wow.
sure enough, that's what happened. God will prepare you if you open yourself spiritually
Mm-hmm.
to connect spiritually to God. He has a way of preparing you if you make yourself open and become aware of how He's speaking to you. You
Yes.
may not get a word through a prophet or a preached word or a song. You may, but you may not.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was through him directly and through a dream.
Mm.
And so, that particular night, and that was a little after 5, and about 7, I got a call saying that there was an accident. He was involved in an accident, and they didn't want to tell me. And I am pretty persistent. And I said, "No, tell me," because I already kind of knew. And
Mm.
they say he didn't make it. And so I went in denial. I was like, "What do you mean he didn't make it? Did he miss his ride?" you know
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what they meant, but that denial kicked in,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
"Mrs. Ryan, he didn't make it. Do I need to come and get him?" And they was like, "No, he didn't survive the injury." And I said, "Well, are you sure that's my son? Because he has a habit of leaving his wallet, and maybe that's another one of the kids, just
Mm.
going through those things, right?" They said, "No, it is your son." So, after confirming it with his godparents who were there with him at the scene of the accident, and what happened was they were caravanning, some of the others with him,
Mm-hmm.
and they had just come out of a prayer meeting, and what I heard was a very strong, and
Mm.
they were traveling to wherever they were going, and they were going to have an all night prayer session before the next day doing their mission work. And so they were traveling, following each other, because they didn't have a bus or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back of a pickup truck, they had their luggage there and backpacks or whatever. And one of the backpacks blew off of the truck. They all pulled over, and one of the young ladies realized it was hers, and she was going to go get it. And my son, "Oh, you're a girl. I'll go for you. I'll go get it."
Mm.
And when he stepped onto the highway, a car coming over the little hill like thing at about 60 miles per hour hit him.
My.
And so that's what happened with him. So, with that being said, of course, my first thing honestly was like, you know what? I'm going to go to that hospital because they want you to come to identify the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to lay hands on him, and he's going to rise up. And, all these things that you just in a part of denial, right?
Yeah.
And God had already prepared me that it was his time.
Mm.
And so I knew that. So all that other stuff was, just my process.
Yeah.
And then thoughts in my head, okay, I'm going to identify his body. Do I have to? If you say it's him, I believe it's him. Take
Mm.
blood, but they said, no, you must identify the body. So in my head, I was thinking that, oh, I'm going to see this mangled. You know how when you see an animal on
Mhm.
the street that has been hit by a car going 35, 40 miles an hour, I mean, it's not a lot left, right? So in my head, I'm thinking, he's going to be unrecognizable. Why do I have to do this? This is torture. But I'm here to tell you that when God is in a thing,
My
when
God.
God is his will, every detail, he's very strategic.
Mhm.
Every detail is taken care of, right? And so as I went to the hospital, I was drove to the hospital, and I remember it's just like it was today. The lights seemed brighter to me. Okay.
Mhm.
They had him behind these double doors. And as I remember they opened the double doors for me to walk in, and he was lying there on the bed, white sheet, and he looked like he was asleep. I did not see a scratch. I did not see a swollen face, a busted lip,
Mhm.
and I didn't see any knots on his head. So I asked, "Are you sure he's gone? Because are you sure he's not in a coma?"
Yeah.
I mean, he looked just like he went to sleep. How could this be? You know, a car going six, how could it be? I
Mhm.
did not understand it. So immediately I thanked them for they cleaned him up, I'm sure.
Mhm.
They cleaned him up, but there was no swelling. He just looked sleep. And he didn't have any like frowns in his forehead, like he was in pain. Because as a mom, I'm looking, okay, did he feel it? Was he in pain? Did he cry? And there were no frowns of like he went through something. Nothing. I mean, like he was just asleep. And my first thought was, how could this be?
Mhm.
And then it was as though every light in the room became brighter.
Mhm.
Don't think they had LED lights back then, but it just seemed like the LED lights, right? And although there were other people in the room with me, I began to not see those people.
Mhm.
Like I don't know. It was like an out of body experience for me.
Yeah.
And I just began to hear the Lord say to me, or angels, or whatever you want to say. I just heard in my spirit that I will be with you as I was with him
Mhm.
always, even to the end. And those were the words I heard.
Wow.
And it sounded audible to me. And I was looking around and I couldn't see the people that were in there with me, but they were there. And
Mhm.
at that moment, I laid my body across his body. And
Mhm.
I began to just give God thanks for allowing me to be the vessel that brought this soul into this world. And I thank God for his 15 years of living. And I thank God for the day that he never gave me any trouble, that he never got it. I thank God for him accepting. I just begin to give God thanks, right? And
Yes.
at that moment, it was just me and God. I didn't care. At that moment, I didn't even remember what had happened. I just felt myself praying and going into a praise, right?
Mhm.
That was natural. That
Right.
definitely was a supernatural, my spirit connecting, because I had went into such a shock, I believe, until God has a way of just covering and taking over. And at
Yeah.
that moment, that's what I needed for my soul to begin to accept, to mourn, to grieve, go through the normal process. It doesn't mean that I didn't go through the normal process. What
Mhm.
it means is that I, at that point, had such a spiritual connection with God that it just kicked in.
Yes.
So that part of it, that's how it happened.
Mhm.
And of course, I went through horrendous mourning and grief and not wanting to eat and losing weight and not. I had to have a babysitter for months at a time, for months, really. My kids and I went into counseling, of course. I
Mhm.
didn't want to go, but I went, and it was the greatest thing for me and the kids.
Mhm.
Um, and I had to have a babysitter because when reality set in, once I buried him, then I just didn't even want to wake up and still be alive anymore. I woke up every day thinking, why did you let me stay here? I want to go with him. Just
Right.
that mother thing. And it was really a process that's an unforgettable process. It was truly a dark night of the soul. I truly was at a place of hopelessness, disconnection, didn't even know how to pray, didn't have the words to pray.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I got amnesia from all the scriptures that I knew. But the one thing, even when I didn't know a scripture, I knew how to say, help me. God, help me. Right.
Yeah.
And I realized that it didn't take a scripture.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to quote a scripture. I didn't, and I didn't have to. God already knew, and he knew, right? And that's just what I had to keep in mind. I know you know,
Mm-hmm.
no. So and that was that. But yeah, it was a real horrific experience, and it's one of those things that just happens because I got peace in knowing that it was his time.
Yeah.
He had fulfilled his purpose, and it was my duty now to do what he did in a shorter amount of time, whatever time I had left, that I wanted to be like him. And I remember when I was ordained as a minister, just a minister before, he
Mm.
was there, and his comment was, I want to be like my mama. And
Wow.
so I remember saying, son, I want to be like you. you
Mm.
know, and that's how that went. But it was an experience that honestly, at this season in my life, I enjoy sharing it. I enjoy sharing it not because it feels good, but because when I look back and see how God restored me, when I think that I could not be restored, I thought that life was over for me.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to be put away in a mental institution, or that I was going to lose my mind. I just thought it was over for me.
I got
I
it.
did.
Wow. If you don't have chills by now, I'm telling you, something ain't right because uh, that is a story that is truth. And
That is
I just appreciate you sharing that truth. And I really, really hope and pray that it's blessing somebody, either somebody who's lost a child or somebody who has children and they may not be they may not be using their perspective of children being a blessing as they should. They're
yes,
taking children for granted. However this is helping, I'm praying that it really is helping someone who's listening on today because it's helping me. And I have no children. I have children that I pour into, that I love on all the time. I have none of my own, and it's something that God knows I want. But just in what you're saying, I want to make sure that I'm prepared to be the best example I can be for my children, and for that to be natural and genuine and not a facade. And so I'm just so grateful for you sharing. Now you've kind of highlighted it a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more specifically about what in your truth? Um, and your most truthful experience, what would you say is the difference between this kind of loss and the loss of a general person, or someone else kind of uh, transitioning in your life? What's the dynamic between this kind of loss and the loss of someone general going in your life?
yes, definitely. Because 3 months before my son uh, passed,
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother, who was like my mother,
Mm-hmm.
had passed. And so I was still in grief from that.
Wow.
And that was in November.
Mm-hmm.
And here it was January. It wasn't 3 months quite, right? That
Yeah.
was the end of November, and his was in January.
Mm-hmm.
And losing and what I who I call Mama,
Mm-hmm.
um, I it was a natural order.
Yes.
And although it hurt tremendously to lose her,
Mm-hmm.
it was a different type of grief in the way that I felt it was just a normal process. I really, I just knew it was, and I knew it would get better. I knew it would take time. But when it came to my son, I didn't think it would get better. I
Yeah.
didn't think I could be restored. That's the major difference. And then I lost a spouse, and it's not as deep as losing a child, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, believe it or not, for me, it was deeper than losing my mama, my grandma,
Right.
who I call mama. Losing my child, because that child was physically a part of me,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was connected by DNA with parents, grandparents, right? My husband, we became one with union,
Right.
but my child was put and placed in my womb.
Yes.
In the womb of a woman is where the strength is.
Yeah.
Your center part of your being is in your womb.
Mm.
And even just as an individual, if you don't have children, you still have a womb as a woman or womb man, right? And in a man, they may not have a physical womb, but there is a central core in your being of your soul,
Mm.
right? That where your strength comes from. All right. And
Yeah.
so when that child is placed in your womb, and God knows the plans for that child, but you don't, and
Mm.
you carry that child and you nurture that child. And when that baby comes through into this world, and we all love babies and we take care of them, and you watch that child grow, and you plant seeds in that child, and you teach that child, and you train that child, and you fix the child's boo-boos, and
Yeah.
every that child depends on you totally,
Mm-hmm.
as they should until they become an adult. But when that child leaves you before it becomes an adult,
Mm-hmm.
it's no words really that can describe that. And so it's a part of you when they go.
Mm.
Although the umbilical cord has long since been cut, but there's a spiritual connection
Absolutely.
that's still there that can never be cut.
Mm. Yes.
And so when I realized that the one day I did ask God, why did you take my child?
Mm-hmm.
And his response to me was, he was not yours.
My God.
He belongs to me, but I value you so much that I allowed him to come and visit with you and gave you permission to train him because I knew you would do it well.
Wow.
And that gave me peace.
Mm.
That was the beginning, that aha moment, that light bulb moment, that exhale moment that started another level of healing for me.
Yeah.
Because then, before that, I felt worthless. I felt devalued. I felt I was cursed. I felt I did something wrong. I wasn't a good mother. God took him because all these natural human things looking for a reason that was my fault, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when God told me that, I began to feel worthy. I began to feel my value coming back. I began to feel special because God said He chose me for this child. Because at my son's homegoing service, the service was so many people from all over places I didn't even know my son knew.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more pastors and bishops and apostles then. And I was like, well, he wasn't a minister, but he wasn't.
Right.
He was a youth missionary. He was. I did not realize that when my son was going on those mission trips, how many lives he touched as a 15-year-old kid.
Yes.
We had to rent a venue that was a mega church, and it was packed, and I was like as if he were a celebrity. I
Mm.
had no idea that my son knew that many people. And it was people that did not know him even that showed up, people that passed by the accident as it happened. And I know came to me, and one gentleman I remember specifically, he said, I had to meet his mother.
Mm.
I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about him. I just know I passed by right after the accident to see what happened. I saw your son and I couldn't get close to him. He said, I felt the presence of angels and I felt the presence of God. And it was so heavy, I couldn't even get close to your son.
Mm.
And he said, I asked around and called around and I wanted to know who is his mother.
My God.
Uh, and I'll never forget it. And I had many testimonies of many people coming to me saying at the scene, it was like they can feel the presence. And when I walked into that room in the hospital, I could feel the presence of the angels there. And God allowed me to have another dream. I have a gift of dreams and
Yeah.
interpreting dreams and things like that.
We
So
should.
God gave me
Yeah.
another dream. Whereas the dream, I said, God, did he hurt? Did he feel it? I was, and everything I asked God, he strategically gave me answers, right? And
Yes.
so I had this vision. I wasn't asleep, it was a vision, and I didn't see the impact, but I did see my son's body, like, really flimsy, going up in the air really, really high. And right before it hit the ground, because I remember saying, why would you let me see that, God? But right before his body hit the ground, I saw two giant beings, angelic beings. And I know that they were angels. I didn't see wings and all that, right? It was so quick, but they were giants. And
Mm.
they swooped him up so fast, like faster than the speed of light. So I knew that he didn't feel anything, that
Mm.
they came and got his soul, and it was just that suit, that body that was there.
My goodness.
That is why all of the people that didn't even know us showed up, because when they passed by and they felt the presence of God.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I knew that my journey of peace and restoration, that's how it started. That's
Mm.
how it started.
Yeah.
Because I would ask God questions and he would answer and respond. It gave me peace. I knew it wasn't my fault, even though it wasn't, but I knew without a doubt. And I felt so privileged that God chose me for this special soul, you know,
Mm.
as unworthy as I felt I was, that he allowed that soul to come through my womb. And at his service, homegoing service, there were countless numbers of teenagers
Mm.
that because I did an altar call and I did, those who didn't know Christ, I opened the doors of the church.
Yeah.
And there were countless numbers of teenagers that gave their life to Christ because of my son.
Wow.
That started my journey of healing and peace in a way that I can explain. The rest was just the natural missing and, process of grieving.
Mm.
But as far as my soul, I had a peace like I had never in my life had.
Yes. Yes. Well, you have definitely spoken a lot. I do want to touch on a few things, and you have answered two of my questions already, so I'm not going to go through them. One being, when did you gain strength? You talked about that, and what had to take place for your journey of restoration to begin. You just talked about that, so perfect. One of the things I want to go back through, and I love that you talked about, you had that conversation with the Lord, and He gave you um, the understanding that you had the privilege. He trusted you and entrusted a child such as himself to you because he knew you would do the right thing. That's power packed. Because oftentimes that's my prayer to God, is that, Lord, I just want to be right before my children. When you give them to me, I want to be right. I want to make sure that I'm right. Not that, I'm perfect, not and things are going to happen when you're children, but I just want to be righteous before them. I want them to always say, my daddy did the right thing no matter what. If he was angry, if upset, somebody wronged him, whatever. I just never seen him lose his grip. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the ideal that I have when it comes to my desire to be a father someday. And I'm so grateful that he's allowed me to pour into so many children already. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that just warms my heart that he just gives me that privilege to be a surrogate dad and surrogate influence for those children that are always around me. But I think that that's worthy of understanding for all parents, whether you've lost a child or not, whether you're raising children at this point, or you have children that are grown and gone, is understanding that God gave you the privilege to raise them.
Yes.
God gave you
Yes.
the privilege to pour into them. And that is a privilege. It is not a right. You
That's
own children. You don't have rights over children. They are a blessing to you, and you have to be a provider and protector to them. And so I think that's excellent perspective to have, especially if you have lost a child. Start with understanding that God, you gave them to me, and they belong to you, and they're now back. They're in restoration. They're exactly where they originated from, which is you.
yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and so with that in mind, and there's so much more I could unpack with
Yes.
things that
But
you.
I want to interject just for a moment.
Uh-huh.
Something you said. When you were saying that you always want to walk upright with them. Now, let me clarify. Walking upright doesn't mean, like, just as you said, you're not going to always be perfect. But even in those times, if and when you fall before your children,
Mm-hmm.
that is a moment to teach
Yeah.
them,
Teachable moment. Yes.
a teachable moment that, in spite of, God still loves you.
Mm-hmm.
Because my son was, I gave birth to three children, even though I've had many others that I've raised, but I gave birth to three.
Yeah.
And this particular son was not the oldest child. He was the middle child, but the oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was um, my sidekick, as I call him. He was
Yeah.
my bodyguard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he was the one that rode with me on Saturdays when the others didn't want to go with me. And we would go and eat breakfast when they were asleep. And
Mm-hmm.
he would make sure that I was protected in the grocery store and bring my bags out. He would stay up with me and cook and learn how to cook. And in the summertime, I would come home and he'd have the meals done. He was my sidekick. And
Mm-hmm.
there were many times when we would be riding in the car and I would be frustrated. Of course, I was much younger then, 20 years younger, or whatever, right? Well, yeah, even more than 20 years. But I would be riding in the car and somebody cut me off and I'd get an attitude, or I would say something that wasn't very nice about somebody, or, I would just be human, right? And
Yes.
my son would say, "Now, mama, that's not right."
Mm-hmm.
"Now,
Yeah.
mama," he would correct me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he knew right from wrong because I had taught it to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he just regurgitated some things back to me, but it was a teachable moment to let him know that you don't have to be perfect in God's eyes.
Yes.
But if your heart, God sees your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so he learned that at an early age. And so one of the things that some parents have after losing a child, which I'm grateful I didn't, is regrets.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the regrets. I always told my children how
Mm.
much I loved them and lifted them up and built them up and told them their self-worth. And I didn't just teach them the ABCs, the one, two, threes.
Right.
I didn't just take them to church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really
Yes.
taught them, really taught
Yes.
them. And
Yes.
so they knew, he knew. And so I didn't have regrets. Actually, the last words that we spoke to each other was, "I love you." The
Mm-hmm.
last words I heard him say was, "I love you." And that was the last words I said to him. And so every single day, two or three times a day, we expressed our love to one another. We
Yeah.
did. We expressed our love. So that was a real thing that, that happened that was just wonderful, no regrets. But even if you have regrets, know that God is still with you and that he will never leave you. And then once I got a little stronger, I
Mm.
began to rely on scriptures. And so I'll leave those at the end as takeaways. But yeah,
Uh,
that's how that went.
and we're just about there. I have to
Okay.
get to my consistent portion, which is the quote of the day. And so you guys know that I always have a quote in here somewhere. Uh, we discussed that quote, just a little bit further and talk about what it means to us. But I read this quote that changed my life, and it says, "It is easy to take 1,000 moments for granted when you believe that there will be 1,000 more." Now, let me this by saying this actually, we never got to the quote in my episode one of This Is My Story, but this was actually my quote for losing my mom. So I said, well, let me restore it, let me recycle this justice fit. This, like I said, there are three types of losses that people will never understand until they endure. And like I said, that's the loss of a parent, loss of a spouse, and the loss of a child. Those three types of losses, to me, in my full opinion, are just some of the hardest and toughest to endure. So with that in mind, I'll read the quote one more time. It says, "It is easy to take 1,000 moments for granted when you believe that there will be 1,000 more." What are your thoughts there, Pastor Henry?
Yes, it is definitely. It when you go day by day and
Mm-hmm.
you take life for granted and you get in a routine, and that's what happens. You get in a routine, the busyness of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize at that time that every moment is so precious.
Yeah.
Well, I had the privilege of before this happened to my son, I had a couple of boys that I raised for 8 years in my life. Both their parents were deceased,
Mm-hmm.
and so I saw what happened, and that was the beginning. I remember of giving me, and God allowed that to see how to be intentional about those moments that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I remember when I received those two boys, one was like 9 months and the other was 7 years old. I had them for 8 years. And I remember saying, that could be my children.
Yeah.
So God allowed those kids to come in because God knew that my son was going to be. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going to raise these children and train them in a way and love them in a way with no regrets and make every minute count, because this mother who is gone on didn't realize that she would be gone and leaving her boys. And
Yeah.
so I intentionally, with intent, raised my children with that. I'm going to treasure every moment because you never know.
Yeah.
And it happened.
Absolutely.
Just yeah. So it is very important.
So my take on this quote right here is actually almost literal, because there are 1,440 minutes in a day. Now, granted, the average person sleeps about 8 hours. So if we take 1,000 minutes, right, that will leave you with 440 minutes. If you divide that by 60, that's about roughly 7 hours and 21 minutes, right? Uh,
Hmm.
which is average for sleeping, right? So let's just take that almost literally. There are 1,000 minutes operable in a day, right? So
Hmm.
that's 1,000 moments, each minute being a moment.
Yes.
And it's so easy to take 1,000 of those minutes operable. Okay, there's actually 1,440, but we're going to take those 440 and say we're sleeping. There are
Hmm.
operable moments in a day. It's easy to take all 1,000 of those minutes for granted when you believe that when you wake up from the 440, that there's going to be another 1,000 minutes waiting on, another 1,000 moments waiting on you. And so I say all that to say this: tomorrow is not promised. It's not.
Yes.
Your next minute is not promised, because you only got a good 1,000 of them in that day to operate.
Hmm.
They're not
Hmm.
promised. So each and every moment you have, make it count for something. I'm
Make it count.
grateful that you talked about giving that expression of love to your children every moment you can. That's something that's missing from this day and age, and it's been missing for generations. It's not new. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
been dropping the ball for the last couple of generations. However, uh, a podcast like this, a moment like this, a word like this, I really hope that somebody listen. And like I said, everything we do here at the TCK Table podcast is good stuff, okay? But this episode in particular, even greater than my own, I really, really hope that everyone hears this. And many of you know I say it all the time. Save Our Children, the two-part series, Save Our Children in season one is my favorite episode of the entire podcast. And reason being is because I have a passion for children. I have a love for children. I always say I'm a child magnet. Children just just connect with me. Just I need nothing. I just walk in a room and children just smile. Like I love children, so I don't have any, but I love children. And when we talk about, uh, especially a subject matter like this, these 1,000 minutes that we have in a day, operable. Like I said, that's operable minutes, not when we sleeping. We really have a chance to impact every single minute. We have an opportunity to make an impact.
Yes.
What kind of impact are you doing, or what kind of impact are you making with 1,000 that you have in this moment? Because your next moment is not guaranteed. That next 1,000 not guaranteed.
Yes.
It's
And
not.
and I pray that it touches someone to the point that when you know of or know a parent that has lost a child,
Mm-hmm.
that you are more aware, more sensitive, more understanding
Yes.
of what they may be going through,
Mm.
that you can't see what's on the inside and what they've gone through. It's a scar.
Yeah.
It's like having surgery. You're healed from whatever the surgery repaired,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have a scar to always remind you. And sometimes you get scar tissue, right? And so it's the same with grief. Sometimes the scar doesn't open back up,
Mm-hmm.
but the tissue sometimes collects
Yes.
hurt, grief, pain, and it rises up every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to do something to ease the pain. And what I do is just go back to the same piece, remembering what a beautiful homegoing celebration, remembering the children that dedicated their life to Christ, remembering all the pastors that I never knew my son touched, and remember his joy. And, there are certain scriptures that I may not remember where it is or what it is, but I do remember there's a scripture that says, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, and he's my God and he's my strength, and I will trust in him." It's in Psalms somewhere. And then in Psalms, it also says, I remember saying this to God: "Turn your ear to me, God, and set me free. Be my rock."
Yeah.
Okay. And if it rises up again, if that scar seems like it wants to be a little agitated, that's what I say: "Turn your ear to me, God."
Mm-hmm.
And in Psalms also it says, "I weep with sorrow, me with your word, O Lord."
Mm-hmm.
So just those simple things, just that. And one thing I do want to say as I leave too is, please don't grieve in silence.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out for help. You don't have to be superwoman or superman, right?
Yeah.
Reach out for help. Reach out to someone to talk to that will listen to you.
Mm.
Become as active as you can. Allow the help to help you.
Yes.
God helps us through people, and people aren't available to help if they know you are going to receive the help or be receptive. Sometimes when you're going through the loss of a child, the grief, people don't know what to say. They don't have the words. They just don't know,
Yeah.
but they are willing. God has already ordained people to assist you through the process, whatever the process may be. He has ordained people and put you on the minds and the thoughts of people and in their hearts and in
Mm.
their prayers. And if you open yourself to it, then God will allow them to cross your paths and you can receive the blessing from those people that God has for you to help you to heal. Because I depended and relied on a lot of people to help me through the process. I
Yes.
would not have made it if I wasn't open enough to allow God to, I'm open enough to allow the help from the people that I know God sent to help me. So be open to help. Get counseling if you need it. Go to group therapy if you need it.
Mm.
And one of the main things that I didn't say that turned me around to Davion was when my daughter said, well, Mama, we're hurting too.
Mm. Yeah.
Although he's gone, you still have two children left.
My God.
That hit me like a gut punch because I couldn't be a mother to the other two
Mm.
because I was so in my own, right? But
Yeah.
when she said that, she said, well, we love you too. We're your children too. We're still here. And if I tell you, I stood up like a straight soldier. I quickly dried my eyes because she was so, they were watching me deteriorate with
Mm.
grief and sorrow because I had forgot. God didn't just bless me with one, He
Yeah.
blessed me with others. I still have a purpose here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
remember that.
That's restoration. Now, was that your takeaway, Pastor Henry?
Yeah, that was my
Oh,
takeaway.
okay, because I didn't introduce that portion of the show yet.
Oh,
That's okay.
sorry, but that was my takeaway.
That's all right. Now I will do my takeaway. So, my takeaway is for everyone listening. I can't speak a whole lot on this particular instance and this type of grief, but I can speak from the perspective of a child having lost a mother. And again, yes, that is natural order, but I can speak from that perspective and just offer this that. One thing I'm grateful for is knowing that I was loved. Oftentimes I say this and I mean it. I was loved by the best. My mom was not always the greatest, easiest to get along with, most understanding, not always the most supportive. Yeah, there was a lot of things that my good old wonderful mother was not. But one thing she was a lover, and she made sure that she expressed her love to us. And so I personally, as a child, can say, having been a child, right, I can say that I appreciate more than anything that before my mother left this earth, she made sure we knew and understood that she loved us and she loved each and every one of us. And for me and her relationship, a lot like yours and what you were saying, me and my mom was a road dog. Everywhere
Hmm.
he was, I was, that's just the dynamic
Hmm.
we had and the closeness that we had. So, my advice to parents would be to make sure that you're intentional, and I'm sorry, intentional about the love that you express to your children and making sure that they feel loved every moment they go out of your door in life, because it's that one time where you could have said it but you didn't, where you should have said it but you didn't, that they could walk out that door. And of course, the way the world is today, anything can happen to our children.
That's right.
Anything can happen to our children. It is more dangerous for children now than it has ever been, in my holistic opinion. It is more dangerous and more life threatening for children in every hand. They can't even go to school without thinking about who's got what in their backpack. So, with that being said, as a child, speaking to parents, make sure that every moment, especially before they walk out of the sanctity of your home, that they feel loved by you, that they feel understood by you, that they feel supported by you, that they feel acknowledged by you, that they feel you. Because what you don't want is to have regrets, as Pastor Henry has said. You
Yes.
have regret and sorrow. The sorrow is going
Yes.
to happen.
Yes.
You don't want
Yes.
regrets and sorrow. So that's
Yes.
my takeaway. Parents, make sure that you are expressive
Yes.
love to your children at every opportunity you get, especially before they leave your home at any time.
Yes.
I don't care what they're going out to do. Make sure they know. Make sure they hear those words. Make sure they get that hug. I talked about it in episode 1. I was so appreciative of that one last hug. It just
Yes.
those things matter.
Yes. That
And
one last I love
yeah,
you. That
yeah,
one last I love you. That's what I remember his last words. I
yeah,
love you. And
yeah,
my last words to him was I love you too. So very important. And to the parents who've lost a child, if you have other children, don't forget about them.
yes.
Take that love and put that love into other children. I had a dream after my son passed. He came and he said, Mama, I know you miss me, but all that love that you were going to give to me, give it to somebody else, some other children.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have lost a child, but there are other children that need your love.
Leave your
You
love.
still have love to give. You still have love to give. And I
Yeah.
had the unfortunate thing of I lost a grandson. I had to help my daughter, guide my daughter through losing her son.
Mm-hmm.
So you just never know.
Yes. All right, Pastor Henry. Well, tell them where they can find you, how they can connect with you. If you have email, any kind of, I know you do
Yes.
Facebook, any way that they can reach you.
Okay. I have on Facebook a Facebook group called YEW, which stands for Your Energy Wellness.
Mm,
And it is basically a way to, I believe in healing the mind, body, and soul, just a holistic approach,
yeah.
right? So it's called You. I also have an email address, ms.cjhenry@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I am on Instagram as Your Energy Wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be reached in those ways. If you email me or want to join the Facebook group, it's a private group, UYEW. And I also have a podcast that hasn't been active lately, but it's going to be active again. And it's UYEW for Your Energy Wellness. So I can be reached there. You can reach me through any of those ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I do send out daily inspirations. Once a month, I have the first Saturday of every month, I hold a women's sister circle for healing for all women's in areas of healing. And if you email me or, connect with me, then I can give you that further information about that. And if you want to be on the daily inspirations that I send out, just email me and I'll connect you up.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, like I say, ladies and gentlemen as well, we don't forget about dads who have gone through the same
Yes.
ordeals.
Yes.
No matter who you are, if you've lost a child, we are actively praying your best and praying your restoration. I know you may not believe that it's possible to be restored, but all things are possible to him who believes. So we want you to know that we're going to align with you in prayer and in much thought, that you deserve to be restored as well. So I hope this has been a blessing to you. You guys know where you can find me all day long, The Counselor's Kitchen, on everything: YouTube, Instagram, website. And also, just a little bit of an alert, we have a new Instagram specifically designed for the podcast. I'm going to be posting small clips as well as other things, doing polls. So I'm going to make sure to share that out. It'll be in the description of this video as well as all of Pastor Henry's links. Be sure to go and follow that new Instagram specifically for the podcast. It's going to have polls as well as other information that you can be active with in this next season. Season 3 will be coming very soon. This isn't the end of season 2 yet, but we have a few more episodes and it will be. So I want to get you all involved. And if you like to be a guest on the podcast, it has information on there as well about how to be a guest. So we thank you so much again, Pastor Henry. And I just want to tell you guys, as I do at the end of every podcast, go and be great because you can. All right. So I love y'all. Y'all do that for me. And have a wonderful, blessed day.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.